Are you the only person introducing a German short-haired pointer to water through the sea, or is that a common thing where you live?
Well, where I live at the moment is an island called Jersey, which I guess is old Jersey, really. So it's off the coast of France. It's much closer to France than mainland UK. It doesn't actually have many rivers and sort of lakes and that kind of water, but it has a lot of beaches. So, when it comes to water introduction, that's where we've got all kinds of beaches. We've got stony beaches, we've got sandy beaches, we've got times of day when there's big waves and when there's no waves at all. So it's a great variety of water for a little pup.
How old is that pup?
Pup is 16 and a half weeks. Yeah.
Okay. Are you when that's such a foreign thing to think of water introduction in that kind of water. Are you picking like, is it really calm? Is it, yeah, you're waiting for
Yeah.
the right scenario?
Yeah. So little waves. And the great thing about the beach is it's very naturally sloping entry. So you don't have that worry where you've got a sudden dip and the dog's got to commit to suddenly letting go with their feet. So that's great. And my husband's a really keen kayaker, so he's got like the wetsuit, and he's out in the water very frequently. So he's like out there in the sea, lying around in his wetsuit, encouraging the puppy to swim to him, and then I'm encouraging the puppy to swim back to me. And so yeah, works well.
What's the temperature of the water? Do you know?
I have no idea, and if I did, it would be in Celsius, and probably no one would understand it.
But it's not like freezing cold, obviously.
No, it's very warm. In fact, I think the water temperature is warmer than the air temperature at the moment. At the end of the summer, that's usually how it is. Yeah.
That's that's wild to think about, but it is something. I know our listeners, when we talk about things like that, like the water introduction or gunfire introduction, live bird introduction, all these different things you do with a dog, especially at the age that you're talking about with your little GSP pup. It's always not, I shouldn't say always, but a lot of times people are like, I don't know where to do this. I don't know where to do water introduction. And what you're describing there is vastly different than what a lot of our listeners would probably find, but you can find these training environments anywhere you live.
I mean, I started with just like puddles, just, paddling through puddles. And then on the beach, you get these kind of very much deeper puddles, which they have to kind of almost wade through. So we do that. And then what's great is there are rocks. So you can hop around the rocks and the pup's like climbing through the water and then going through over a rock. And then, so it's kind of in and out of the water. And then now we've got, the beach and my husband in his wetsuit.
So you can kind of step that up a little bit, where you get the pup in a puddle first, and then you get them maybe a little deeper water, or maybe a little bit, something they have to think about navigating, and then eventually it'll be full on swimming in the water.
Yeah, and what's difficult, what we don't have here, is going across water and out the other side. So because that's the problem with the beach and the sea, is you don't really have many of those places where you can then get out the other side. So there's kind of a seasonal lake here. You can go across that particular lake, and so that's what we use for that. But apart from that, it's all the sea, and so that's what we have a shortage of. And I'm quite envious of when I watch retriever training DVDs in North America, and I see like these really impressive purpose-built lakes with retrievers going across. I'm like, God, I wish we had some of that here. But no, we have the sea.
Well, you work with what you have.
Yeah.
And I think one of the reasons we bought the house that we live in is I have a pond in my backyard, and I can train my dog in there. I train my dog in there probably, we have long winters, so obviously you're training on the pond when it's frozen, not in it. But it's so, you take stuff for granted. Where I live, I can be at a nice lake in 2 minutes with a gradual sand like you're talking about. I can train in the pond in the backyard. I've got multiple rivers of different sizes to train in, to work current and different stuff. And it's just all about finding what you have available. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but you're probably most well known for being a force-free trainer.
Yeah.
Force fetching here is very common. You take a dog to a dog trainer, hunting dog to a dog trainer, they're probably going to get force fetched. And we kind of go down this weird road with this because it sounds bad, and it can be done in a way that can be a little nasty, or it can be done in a way that's not that bad. Really, it's really not that bad for the dog, but it just sounds bad. But you're talking about not having to do that. You have a different way to achieve that hold and carry.
Well, there's something called the clicker retrieve. So I see it as like the force-free alternative to force fetch. But I would also say, in traditional UK training, force fetch isn't done. So I know that I might be seen as a bit of an outlier and a bit of a weirdo doing these kind of force-free clicker retrieve stuff. But even in mainstream UK training, dogs are not force fetched. And we still have field trials. We still have dogs performing reliably, picking up everything they're sent for, and performing to a really high standard. So it's a myth that in order to have a reliable retrieve, you have to force fetch, because we don't. So that's one thing I'd say. But the other thing in terms of the clicker retrieve process, so I do think that a retrieve is easy. It's easier to achieve a reliable retrieve if you formalize it. But I disagree that you have to formalize it in a way that uses force. You can formalize it and you can break it down into a chain for the dog using force-free methods. And so, that's what the clicker retrieve process is.
Well, can you explain that then? So explain what you mean by clicker retrieve, and explain what you mean about, formalizing it, getting the results, but not going the traditional force fetch route.
Yeah, so basically the retrieve, I think sometimes people think of the retrieve as like it's one behavior, like, it's sit, or like it's lie down, or like it's heel or whatever. But actually it's a chain of behaviors. It's the sort of wait at your side, mark the thing in the air, go when you're sent to go get it, put your mouth around it securely, pick it up, hold it and carry it, bring it back, deliver it to hand. So it's like a chain of behaviors, and rather than one behavior. So what we have to do, because what often happens is a bit of that chain will be weak or unreliable, it will fall apart. And so really we have to kind of make sure that all these bits of the chain are trained reliably separately, just like that, example of a musician practicing that bar over and over and over again. We have to isolate those bits of the retrieve that may be weak and go through them over and over and over again until they are strong. And then we can put them together into that chain again. So the clicker retrieve process, I should point out that actually there's not like one clicker retrieve. There's probably, just like there is probably not one method of doing force fetch, there's probably bazillions of different variations on it. There's not one clicker retrieve method. There's like several different variations. But the variation which I do, you'd start out sitting in a chair, you would put the dummy at your feet. You would click the dog, even for just looking at the dummy, and every click's associated with a treat. So the dog touches the dummy, you would click when they touch it, and then you would throw the treat away from the dummy so the dog runs off and gets the treat, and then you click again when they come back and they touch it again, and you just do this over and over again. So what you get is a dog approaching the dummy from many different angles. Dogs which like to pick dummies up and run off with them, or don't like to actually bring them back to you because they want to keep away from you. It's really good for fixing those issues. And actually I find it really effective for resource guarding as well. So I sort of see the clicker retrieve as almost a solution for that too. Because there's no better way to work with a dog which resource guards than to teach them to want to bring things to you. It's like, anti-resource guarding, as it were. Once you've got the dog touching the dummy, then you would delay your click, and often the dog gets a bit frustrated because they're like, "Look, you've been clicking me bazillions of times, we're just touching it, and now you're not clicking me." And so they're a bit frustrated, and they shove it a bit harder, and you would click that harder shove, and sometimes their mouth goes around it as well at that point. And sometimes these steps like are just zipped through. So if you've got a dog which just loves to pick things up, sometimes they'll just go right to just picking it up anyway, and you can just go with that. So you'll click them picking it up. The important bit is when you click, they will drop. So that's kind of sometimes screws with people's heads. And it was difficult for me to get my head around that at first, because before I discovered the clicker retrieve process, I, did not ever want to see a dummy on the floor. I wanted to always see it come back to my hand. Like, you would not want to reinforce a dog for dropping on the floor. So it was difficult to accept that I should click when the dog picks it up, and then the dog should drop at the click and it falls to the floor, and then you throw the treat away again. But this is where you get rid of the resource guarding stuff, because the resource guarding stuff happens because the dog sees you as a threat to their possession of the dummy or bumper. So it's like you versus them and who gets it. Whereas if you can communicate to the dog, I don't want to take it off you, I just care about what you do with it, then you get rid of all the resource guarding stuff. And then you will teach the dog separately. You've been teaching the dog a hand target, so to target the palm of your hand with their nose. And then you just put that in once they're holding the dummy, you just put that in with the holding the dummy. So you would click when they touch your palm whilst holding the dummy, and you would still let it fall to the floor out of your hand. So I often say to people, click if you could have taken it, but don't take it for a while until you've got rid of all of that kind of residual resource guarding stuff or keep away stuff.
The resource guarding stuff you're talking about, that keeps coming up, and we over here, we just call it avoidance behavior, but it's a very, very common problem. And I want to back up just for a second before we'll dive into that. But when you describe a retrieve as being a chain or a series of behaviors, I want to get into that a little bit more because I think people do look at it as a just, like a sit, a heel, a whatever one-off command that's a very simple one type of behavior. And I think the problem that you see a lot of times is this, if there is a weak link, like you mentioned in the process of a retrieve, there's cascading failures that follow it. And I think people don't really understand that. They're not thinking of it the way you're describing it. I love the way that you put that.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you think about it, the retrieve can go wrong at any number of points. So there's the dummy or bumper that's thrown, and then the dog which isn't interested in it at all and just goes off to go sniff something and doesn't want to go pick it up. And then you've got the dog which goes and picks it up, but then they drop it because they want to sniff something or they want to go cock their leg or do something. Then you've got the dog that goes and picks it up and maybe loves it a bit too much and doesn't want to bring it back to you and wants to run off with it or dance around you with it and not actually bring it to you. And then you've got the dog which brings it to you, but they just keep dropping it just a little bit too far away from you, a meter or two away from you, and you haven't got the delivery. So there's probably many other places that things can go wrong as well. So yeah, the things can go wrong at any point in this chain, and it's difficult if you're not breaking the chain down to get into the middle of it and isolate the bit that's not working and strengthen that bit unless you're breaking it down in some way.